A dangerous trend is spreading across North America. People without medical training are selling phony autism cures to desperate parents, putting thousands of children at risk. Welcome back to Big If True, Season 2. I'm Molly Thomas. Autism spectrum disorder affects how people speak, learn, and communicate with the world. Today in Canada, roughly 1 in 50 children or youth will be diagnosed with autism. It's a complex condition with no known cure, which makes it a target for false hope. Tonight, we interview an American mother who goes undercover to investigate fake autism treatments. She teams up with a Canadian journalist to expose the dangers of these claims. We also have a doctor to debunk misinformation promoted online. Plus, an advocate on the spectrum shares her lived experience. But first, let's look into some so-called cures spreading in support groups. Families of children with autism are often exposed to false claims like this.
Chlorine dioxide has recovered and cured 400 plus children from autism.
Chlorine dioxide is a chemical similar to bleach. Parents are told it will cleanse the body of toxins, but it can cause severe organ damage. Both the FDA and Health Canada warn against using it. There's also supplements for sale and extreme diets on the autism curing menu. And many parents turn to unapproved IV drug treatments too, believing chemicals injected into the bloodstream will remove toxic metals to relieve symptoms of autism. But there's no evidence to support that. Others rely on Suramin, a drug used to treat African sleeping sickness. Despite only a few clinical trials for autism, it's being shared in parent support groups as a solution. Doctors are raising serious concerns as children get extremely sick and sometimes even die. One mother is on a mission to make change. Melissa Eaton finds and infiltrates groups selling snake oil cures for autism. She partnered with Bethany Lindsay from the Investigative Journalism Foundation to expose what's happening online. Melissa and Bethany, so great to have you on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Molly.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Melissa, how did you first, find out about these support groups?
Well, I had joined support groups myself right after my son was diagnosed and during that process because I really had questions when I left the doctor's office that they didn't answer or that I thought of when I was, out of there, and I wanted to, get started. I wanted to help him. And so I went looking for support. And there were so many parents in these groups, so there wasn't like I could do something about every single case.
Sure.
And I wasn't able to speak out in the groups because I could tell right away that, speaking out against these things would get you shunned from them. So I just kind of stayed put and monitored. And when I would see that there was a child that was given something and they were harmed, they were having a reaction, then I would report it to the authorities. I would try to bring attention to it through the media.
Wow.
And do the best that I could to try to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, Bethany, I know that you've been reporting on so-called, miracle cures around autism for quite a long time. How has the landscape changed?
Oh, man, it's just like a never-ending flood of stuff out there. When I started this, it was like one tip about a treatment that claimed that it could do complete elimination of autism that I'm sure Melissa's aware of through like extremely high doses of vitamin C. And, that doing that one story, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I've just gotten so many different tips from people like Melissa saying like, I'm so concerned about what I'm seeing online. And things pop up again and again.
Bethany, you're investigating this. So who is making money off these so-called autism cures that we know don't exist?
Yeah, that part isn't always totally clear, but we've seen people who say they are moms of autistic kids who are arranging, for example, to have an industrial chemical imported into the US or Canada from China to rub on their kids' skin And so, that mom may be making money by arranging this. I've seen cases where regulated health professionals, like a naturopath here in BC, was making money charging parents tens of thousands of dollars to give their kids fecal transplants in Mexico. So there are all sorts of people making money off of this.
So you've gone to the authorities. Have you actually seen changes, Melissa, from these groups that you are getting in the middle of and finding out what they're actually putting out there?
Yes, actually in 2020, when the pandemic began, we began to see some action from regulators. The FDA took action against one of the products that we see frequently, which is chlorine dioxide, or they call it Miracle Mineral Solution. There were 4 people that were arrested and charged.
Melissa, how do people view you, because there's so many people in these groups, families, and so many different situations. Like, how do they view you? Do they view you as a friend or an enemy then, I guess, as you are doing, what you feel called to do?
Definitely an enemy, because these people have been convinced that they're doing something to help their child. They're not necessarily convinced that this is going to harm their child. They're often told when there is symptoms displayed, like the child's vomiting or having, very severe symptoms, that just means the product is working. And so a lot of these people, they are in spaces where there's nothing but misinformation. And to them, it seems like when they are given the proper information, that they're hesitant to believe that, because they're kind of surrounded in an echo chamber of things that aren't true.
Melissa, that's got to take a toll on you, though, as a person.
It does. It does. When I first started doing this, I was really targeting the chlorine dioxide, but that was really just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And I kind of felt like, okay, this is online. It's not really out in mainstream. People aren't seeing this. If I do something about it, this should be really easy to get, some action taken for it. But what I found is that it's not been. And I'm kind of stuck just continuing to monitor this, because nobody's really helping the children that are being subjected to this.
I want to come to Bethany. What is the solution to these scams?
That's a great question. I've been spending some time over the last couple of weeks talking to experts about, how do we deal with this spreading, particularly on social media. And, platforms like Facebook, they do have rules about misleading ads and about not promoting misinformation, even in these private groups that Melissa is going into. So they say, it's not an easy solution, and there's probably not a silver bullet, but we've managed to get rid of this stuff for the most part on TV, on the radio, on newspapers. Surely there are regulations that we can have that hold social media platforms accountable to make sure that this stuff doesn't proliferate.
Melissa, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Bethany is correct. There's not really a monitoring on social media other than the people who run the platforms. And so regulators aren't inside these groups. They don't have access to these groups. And in order for them to find out about them, generally someone would have to report to them about them, and then they can't necessarily gain access to these secret spaces. So it really shows that there's a problem, in a digital age, of regulating these products, and that some action needs to be taken so that authorities can kind of stop some of these things before they get so widespread.
Yeah. What's the one thing, Bethany, that parents out there should be watching for when they are looking for things to help their child that's autistic?
I would advise any parent to seek out the voices of autistic adults who maybe can explain a little about, what these experimental, dangerous treatments have meant in their lives, and about what they really want, which is, support and acceptance, not being cured.
Melissa, for the parents out there, what is your advice?
I see where you're struggling, and I know that there is help available to you, but the people that you're surrounding yourself with aren't the ones that are going to be able to provide that. You need to be reaching out to your doctors, to your community members, as Bethany said, to the autistic community who can kind of give you the insight on things that you're lacking as far as how to help your child. And I guess just really look at the groups that you're in and what the motivation of these people are, because they're making a lot of money and they're doing a lot of harm.
Thank you for all the work that both of you do. So great to have you on Big If True.
Thank you.
You can check out Bethany's special investigation into these fake autism cures on the IJF's website. She's also written a personal column on the subject for TVO. As Melissa and Bethany combat misinformation online, medical professionals are trying to convince parents to stick to evidence-based treatments. Dr. Melanie Penner is a developmental pediatrician at Holland Bloorview Kids Hospital right here in Toronto. Dr. Penner, so nice to have you on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Penner, you are working front line with families of children with autism. How often do wild treatments, come up in conversation?
If I have a full day of clinic, there is an unproven treatment that is going to come up in discussion somewhere. So often families are encountering these things in their parent groups, online, in different autism groups that they might be in. And I will say that it's a good news thing for me when families actually bring that question to me as their physician, and they want to know, is this a thing to give my child? So I think that's far better than the alternative of a family just kind of deciding to try it out without informing their healthcare provider.
Doctor, we're seeing everything from drinking or bathing in urine for supposed cures to fecal transplants. I mean, is there any truth in any of that?
Right now, we don't have any evidence that there is anything that you can put in your body, put on your body, that addresses the core features of autism, and certainly not that would be a cure for autism.
And then I think about the fecal transplants. I mean, are there like grains of truth sometimes that people latch onto?
So in that case, right, we do have evidence that autistic children have different microbiomes, or the gut bacteria, that live inside your body. And that could be due to the different diets that they eat. And that is that kind of bit of scientific truth that people have built on to say, okay, maybe fecal transplants can be a potential treatment. What's important to know with that is that even though there's a bit of scientific truth there, it has not followed the full scientific process all the way through to be able to say, we know that a fecal transplant is a safe and effective treatment. Far, far from that. So fecal transplants are not something that I am recommending for any of my families.
What sort of health risks are you worried about when it comes to unproven treatments?
There are myriad health risks that can come. They are all sort of dependent on what the particular treatment is, as well as the route that the treatment goes into your body, right? So exposing your skin to something like a bath can cause skin irritation. There are other routes, though, that can be even more dangerous. So putting something inside of your body carries more risk. And then we have also heard of IV-based treatments, and those certainly carry the most risk that go along with them. And so one of the ones that we always recommend against IV chelation, which was due to the kind of debunked idea that autism is related to metals in your body that can cause rapid shifts in the minerals of your body, and has a mortality risk that is associated with it. So children have died from that treatment.
It's so crazy because we know that so many parents are just trying to do the best for their kids, and then you're just seeing such harmful effects of just trying, right, and seeing what's out there. It's so scary to be thinking about.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand where that family is coming from their emotional kind of landscape, and meeting them where they are at that way, but also trying to kind of redirect to safer and more effective alternatives.
So then what does a proper treatment and support plan look like?
Yeah. So really, we start with hearing the family's lived reality, that child's lived reality. What is causing the most friction in their day-to-day life? And often it is not about kind of finding a cure for autism. It is about finding a way to help that child build specific skills that they need. So they may need skills with communication. They may need skills with some of their, daily living activities like getting dressed or going to the bathroom. Those things can have tremendous impact on a child's quality of life. And so what we do is try to think about the therapies that can help those children learn those skills.
What's one piece of advice, doctor, you have for parents navigating this murky information environment?
Go talk to your doctor, please. These studies are often really, really hard to unpack, to understand where the quality elements of the studies are. Your doctor has had training to be able to do that. And so, instead of doing your own research online, where you might find some studies, just the existence of a study is not enough. You really need to talk to your doctor to be able to understand how well has this been studied? Do we know that it's effective and know that it's safe before I give it to my child?
In just a few moments, an autism advocate joins us on the show. But first, let's check out the false info in the news with Charlie Buckley.
You may have seen this clip of Donald Trump trying to rewrite the history of the war in Afghanistan.
We've never needed them. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
That was the President of the United States, belittling NATO allies like Canada. Unsurprisingly, there's been some backlash. Listen to this veteran talking to CBC.
I was outraged by the comment. Afghanistan, the whole country, is the front line.
Here are the facts. After the September 11th terror attacks, NATO invoked Article 5, calling on allies of the United States to respond. Canada did, deploying more than 40,000 troops to Afghanistan and the surrounding region. And we paid a great price for that. Over the course of the war, 158 Canadian soldiers died in Afghanistan. Thousands more were injured. This was Canada's longest war. Here's retired combat engineer Sean Connors, again with CBC.
You should apologize to the families of the people that lost their children.
Some Canadian soldiers took it a little further, ridiculing the president's remarks online, posting photos from Afghanistan, quote-unquote, a little back from the front lines. Ontario got buried in last month's storm, but how much snow did we really get? In late January, a huge swath of the country was hit with record-breaking snowfall.
Go, Kylie, go!
Bringing cities like Toronto to a halt. Now, the storm sparked the usual flurry of exaggerated videos made with AI, but there was also a bit of a mix-up about how much snow we got.
Some areas received up to 56 meters of snow.
Centimeters. That should be 56 centimeters. 56 meters is more like 19 stories tall, or about as big as our building here at TVO. Some people online were quick to point out the gaffe, but in all seriousness, the amount of snow we did get was still record-breaking for Toronto. Luckily for us, according to Wires and Willie, we're in for an early spring. There's more than one heated rivalry in the news these days. Recently, Donald Trump claimed that if Canada makes a trade deal with China, this would happen.
First thing they're going to do is say you're not allowed to play ice hockey anymore. That's not good. Canada's not going to play.
It can be hard to tell when Trump is being serious, but what does this even mean? For one thing, China has a national hockey team. They made their Olympic debut back in 1998, the year I was born. Plus, the love for our national pastime is on the rise in China, as the NHL invests heavily in grassroots players and programming. During Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final back in 2017, more than 20 million people were watching in China. Listen, a new trade relationship could mean big changes for Canada, but I wouldn't expect our ice time to be a line item anytime soon. That's your reality check. Now you're in the know.
This conversation is personal for anyone touched by autism. Our next guest, Anne Borden-King, has autism herself. So does her son. She also hosts Non-Compliant, a neurodiversity podcast. Anne, great to have you on the show today.
Nice to be here.
And I'm curious, why is autism such a magnet for misinformation?
Well, I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and what I find is that when you look at any type of pseudoscience or any type of snake oil, whether it's for diabetes or heart disease or anything in that kind of realm, they'll usually add autism to the list. And the reason for that is that autism is a very kind of amorphous diagnosis. It's not like something like cancer where you might have a tumor that you can detect and watch and shrink and remove. It's something that we don't totally understand. And so I think a lot of parents feel very unsure about how to treat it. And then someone will step in from the snake oil community and make it seem like something that's medicalized. And this is the whole theater of pretending to be a doctor that they do, right? And they'll give parents this false reassurance that they understand autism in some sort of medical way, and that the solutions that they provide will provide kind of a medical answer to something which really is just a condition and isn't cured in any sort of medical way.
But people are still pushing that point of view to sell products. I mean, you live with autism. Is that offensive?
I would say it's really, really not helpful, and it's quite harmful emotionally to the autistic person. It kind of is treating the child like a broken version of normal, or like they're sick. But if you want a child to have confidence, resilience, all of the qualities that you really need to have, you really can't just be constantly pushing this message at them that they're broken and that they need to be fixed and that they're not good enough. So it's not only are there physical risks, which we could certainly get into, but there's also an emotional risk as well, real emotional damage coming from especially the more and more treatments that they pile on. Even research has been so focused on a cure. Why are we not focusing more on something like the social model of disability, where we're looking at ways to make schools more accessible, to make everything, social institutions, church, the workplace, wherever people go, we can easily start to make these places better and more comfortable. We can also provide tools for education and for communication to help people who are partially speaking or non-speaking. Once you give these tools to people, to families and individuals, you find an incredible level of quality of life increase that you just don't find when you're poking at it with tinctures and trying to cure it.
If there's one thing viewers should take away from this conversation about, all these fake cures out there, what do you want them to know?
I think that you're never going to find the solution in a bottle. What we need to do is we need to build better solutions together in the community, in the schools, improving schools, making classrooms better, making accessibility better, creating an environment that's more comfortable for autistic people so that they can belong. And this is the kind of work that you can't create a big grift around and make a bunch of money. And it's not a simple and easy solution. It kind of involves all of us working together with a sense of commitment and love and a desire to improve communication and life for autistic people. And it's already happening more and more every day. So I'm quite optimistic that we're going to start moving away from the old cure model and more towards a social model of disability.
Great to have you on the show today, Anne.
Thank you so much.
Soon on Big If True, lawsuits against big tech are mounting over allegations that AI chatbots are causing mental distress and have been linked to some deaths. We'll speak to the lawyer representing a Canadian plaintiff.
Not sure who to trust in a world of misinformation? Come to Big If True. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. Visit our website for extra content. Email us to get your thoughts on the show.
In a world where we're constantly targeted by medical misinformation, I really feel for parents trying to figure out the best way forward for their child. We hope this episode helped you rule out some risky options and get a better sense of what might help. I'm Molly Thomas. We'll see you next Sunday at 8 or anytime online.